And actually, which is why I keep getting sidetracked. But which is why I want to actually talk about how to do project management for an individual. So let's talk about Stack Overflow, indexing, prioritizing opportunity. Okay, cool, we're doing it. So let's say that there is a few things that are going on here. So am I in the way? Hold on, let me get rid of this bar here. Okay. So let's say that you are a person who has constraints. So how do I close this? Okay, there we go. So there are a few constraints that every person is imposed upon, right? So let's say that let's call this our list of constraints. So every person is constrained by time, financial resources, available technology, knowledge. There's more. Of course, this is not the full list of constraints that keep people stuck, but this is just a list of constraints that I think are relevant to what I'm going to be talking about right now. So let's say that you are a young upstart engineer who wants to create a project. So let's talk about what a project looks like at the beginning and end too, right? So let's say that this is the start of a project and this is the end of a project. So basically you can imagine that all projects move from X to Y here, right? All projects start off as basically ideas. They also start off as, so let's say that a project always starts off as an idea. It starts off as a collection of loose thoughts around a subject. It also is a desire, we could say, right? So like when you have a desire to finish a project, you're like, oh, I think my life will be better and when I have this thing, which is a potential solution to a problem. The end of a project is going to look something more along the lines of a finished solution to a problem. It's going to be a real app / physical object in the universe. And it's going to be, I would argue, consistent. And maybe I can talk a little bit about what I mean by the word consistent here, because that's strange. So I think consistent in this case actually is referencing the idea that every time you run whatever you're running, it'll work every single time, right? So every time you hit 1 minute on the microwave, you expect the microwave to run for 1 minute, right? You don't expect it to run for 25 minutes, or you don't expect it to explode or whatever, right? So usually when a finished project works consistently and when it breaks, we call that a malfunction, right? So as a creator, and I'm not even going to say developer, because I know, Katuna, like you said, you're in economics, for example. There's a world where like you have to kind of like move from a loose idea into something that's like a finished thing that you can hold within your hands. And getting from X to Y is not trivial, right? Like there's a lot of things that need to happen for people to feel that a project is complete. And most of these things are held under these constraints where you have time constraints. So you'd be like, okay, I need to finish this in at the most like a human lifespan, because there are projects that can take a whole lifespan. But then there's like the books that people write for like 10 years or 20 years, or the movies like Avatar 2, for example. So Avatar 2 is coming out soon, and this is funny. So Avatar The Way of Water is is coming out like 20 years after the original came out. So wait, let me see. The original came out in, when did the original Avatar come out? Avatar release date. So the original Avatar release date came out December 18th, 2009. This new one is coming out December 16th, 2022. So the question might be asked, why did it take so long to complete this project? And it's not like it caught anyone off guard too, right? Like I would argue that both of these count in our finished project things. Why? Because like, let's say that it's a finished solution to a real problem. So like James Cameron made Avatar. It's a real physical object in the universe. You can go see Avatar 1 today, and on December 22nd, you'll see Avatar 2. And it's consistent because every time you watch Avatar, it's the same movie, right? It's still Avatar. It's always going to be Avatar. You're never going to turn on the Avatar DVD and Titanic will start playing, which is also another James Cameron movie, funnily enough. But I think it's really interesting to look at the fact that both of these finished projects operated under the same constraints, where they had time, they had financial resources that was available to the company or the studio in the case of Avatar, available technology. So Avatar in 2009 was really popular because it was super technologically advanced for the time. People would go to Avatar and they would like leave the theater crying because they were so sad to go back into like the real world, for example, right? But in 2022, the technology of Avatar isn't that exciting exciting anymore. It's not that new to like use CGI, right? Like it's in all Marvel movies. Like TikTokers use CGI. Like it's not a big deal to like use crazy CGI anymore. So the the available technology has gotten better. We now live in a world where AR and VR are more common. Things that happened in 2009 technologically just didn't exist now, that do exist now, if that makes sense. And knowledge, right? So the studio that paid for Avatar knew that James Cameron made a ton of money off of Avatar, right? So that was like one of the knowledge things that they went into the creation of Avatar 2 with, but they didn't know that he was going to take 13 years to release the second movie on a thing that they signed up for 5 for, right? So they signed up for 5 movies and he's taking 13 years to release the second movie. I know, right? Which is crazy. So obviously we're not working on the scale of Avatar here. Like these projects, I just wanted to make the point that creative projects are something that can span whole different fields. Like I think I'm of the mind that creativity isn't limited to one field. Creativity can exist in how you dance. Creativity can exist in how you talk to other people. Creativity can exist in what you create live, like on live stream here. Like this live streaming is a creative act. But it's interesting, I think, as a product developer and as a software engineer to talk about how I deal with these constraints and how I choose projects and how I deal with the kind of anxiety of not being able to complete all the projects that I want to be able to complete, but also being able to consistently finish stuff, right? Because I think that we all want to feel like we can finish Avatar 2 less than 13 years after Avatar 1, right? I feel like we all, if we in this chat right now, we're all James Cameron, would we be confident that we could complete Avatar in a reasonable clip, right? So I want to talk about this. So I want to show you kind of a list of different stream ideas that I have had, and I can like just show you some of these are like kind of like I want to keep a secret because I think they're kind of fun and neat. But let's say that like I have these let's just do all of these. This is good. So I'm going to copy it in here. I swear I have so many windows sometimes. It's crazy. I wish I had like maybe I'll write a bot that does it for me. That's another project, right? So this is just a sample of like projects that I want to build for this stream, right? So I can talk about how I think that each of these projects would end, but I can kind of just like run over it really quickly and say kind of like what I see them taking and like what it means to kind of like finish a project, right? And how much time things take. So for example, let's talk about like the history of open floor office layout. So for this one, I've had the idea for a while. Lower the opacity of this to that maybe. I used to work in like one of those tech offices that like has those open floor office layouts, and they're like to me pretty miserable. Like I felt very uncomfortable working in an open floor layout because even though it was like the idea was to enhance creativity and communication between the teams, I think it just made it awkward to have conversations about things, right? So like let's say that you were like trying to have a conversation like with your team member. So like, you know, your team member's over here and she comes up with something interesting, and then you're over here and you have to like go talk to her about something. But then also because people have ears, there's like 5 other people who are just like also like in the way, right? So like you'll be in an open floor office layout, and because everybody is in the same space and everybody can hear your conversation, there is no such thing as like a private conversation. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how I think open office floor layouts are just ridiculous and that they actually cause less creativity to happen within an office environment. So like the time constraint of that is actually relatively short, right? A lot of this is kind of like me just ranting about anecdotal experience, maybe going back and adding some detailed data for some research that I found on the internet. Let's say that we do 3 to 5 papers that talk about the open floor office layout. Relatively entertaining, pretty interesting. Financial resources, it doesn't cost me anything to make this. The available technology, again, this is just basically an ExcaliDraw demonstration, but also I might make a slideshow using Obsidian Advanced Slides, and the knowledge is probably the bottleneck. So the biggest bottleneck for this would be the knowledge to create an entertaining dialogue from this thing. The World Around Prince of Egypt movie is different, right? So even even though it's very similar in the sense that like both are videos or blog posts, they're not code based, right? This one involves a lot more research. So it involves a lot more time as a bottleneck and knowledge. The available technology and financial resources fortunately don't also come into play here, but something to think about. Virtual computers in 3JS. Actually, let's skip that one because whatever. The Fireplace Lo-Fi note-taking Obsidian app. So this one came to me because like I have like a on my YouTube, there's like a thing that like shows you what people who are watching your videos are searching, and like YouTube will be like, did you know that a lot of people are searching for like study rooms and fireplaces? And I'm like, that's kind of interesting because like a lot of people do go onto Obsidian and they're kind of like looking for like a way to like kind of just like chill for a few hours and like add a bunch of notes about whatever they're studying: economics, calculus, mathematics, computer science. And being able to like create like a little lo-fi app that maybe like loads your favorite lo-fi video into Obsidian and puts it in the bottom right corner, I think could be really funny. But that actually requires a lot more knowledge resources, because that means that I'll have to actually use the available technology. So this available technology hasn't come into play until this last one here that we're just talking about, but I would need to know what technology is available to me to be able to make this thing, because it might just so happen that the iframe loading for this Fireplace Lo-Fi thing wouldn't work consistently. Or what happens when users are trying to use it but then they get stuck in certain loops, right? Like what happens if you want to like load a new video in, right? There's a whole bunch of things that can kind of like break in real time that you need to account for. And then finally, let's talk about this iOS Shortcut Audit, where this is another project, and basically the idea is just to go over kind of like a lot of those shortcuts that we were talking about earlier in the chat, where people were saying like, oh hey, like how do you handle mobile additions to Obsidian? And being able to audit the different shortcuts that I made, I think could be helpful too. And that is also just mainly a time constraint. So as we noticed here, most projects are time and knowledge, right? So obviously time and knowledge, I'll keep that structure. Thanks. Yeah. Time and knowledge tend to be the biggest barriers, I think, to a project's success. And I think that there are a few things that you can do consistently that I've learned over the years that make projects easier. So let's talk about that. So like, let's go here and let's say transparent, and then let's up the opacity, and let's go here and let's call this delivering on your work. So what are some things that we can do to consistently deliver on our work? I think that we can use prior work as a footstool for success. So basically what this means is that you want to be able to use the stuff that you've already written, the stuff that you've already coded, to leverage to make new things. So like, for example, with the Obsidian thing that we were talking about with my CMS, with Tomorrow and Kaneki, was that I was able to leverage stuff that I had built in the past using Obsidian's plugins to kind of like skip a lot of steps, right? So that my available technology bottleneck was a lot smaller. For time, I think that the MVP model is super helpful. So if you're not familiar with the MVP model, this is a very common trope in technology, where just the idea is that you create the minimum viable version of the product that you're trying to create. So maybe we can jump back up here and we can talk about what the minimum viable version of these things look like, right? So the minimum viable world around Prince of Egypt, to me, is roughly a 10-minute video that's relatively engaging, as engaging as I can be. I'm not like Mr. Beast, but like as engaging as I can be about an interesting topic of the Prince of Egypt. So that probably requires 3 to 5 interesting sources that are interlinked, and things that people would be excited to tell their friends about, because right, like that's the minimum of video. Same thing with this history of open office floor layouts, a little bit more opinionated, this one than this one. Obviously this one's much more factual and more journalistic, and then this one is more railing on open floor office layouts. This Fireplace Lo-Fi note-taking one is interesting, right? Because like, what is the minimum viable product for the Fireplace Lo-Fi note-taking app? And I would argue that it would be something where you could hit a hotkey and then it would just start playing like Lo-Fi Chill Girl and you would just be sitting there, and like you would be able to hit play and pause really easily. Maybe have like a search bar where you can choose between a few videos, right? That's probably the minimum one. Obviously you can continue to scale it. It's like, oh well, then you could just play any YouTube video or something like that. But I think the idea would be that it would be just kind of like a fun little like study background type situation. So there's probably like some CSS that needs to be on there too. iOS Shortcut Audit, again, minimum viable shortcut audit would be like a 10-minute video that just talks about interesting shortcuts that can help people write better capture other tools for apps like Obsidian, but also just talking about other shortcuts that I use day to day, because I think that just shortcuts is low-key underrated. It's like insane to use. Like shortcuts, it's like a hellscape to program in. And if anyone learns to program through shortcuts, I pity them, because shortcuts is a miserable programming experience, and they're gonna think that programming is miserable when in fact it's shortcuts that is miserable. But I think that the stuff that you can make with shortcuts is just really, really, really kind of cool. So yeah, but anyway, so these are the things that we can start with. So we can say that you have to use your prior work as a footstool for your success is very important. So how do I change the color of this text? Just this text. No, I don't want to do that. I don't know if you can do that. I wonder if there's like plugins or something. I keep saying like whenever I hit this like or this Obsidian button, they have like insert actions and stuff like that. What does this do? Oh, you can select a drawing. What does this do? Markdown, LaTeX expression for you math heads out there. Links. What does this do? Oh, I don't know what that does. Export. I don't really want to export right now. TM. Weird. What does that do? Oh, full screen. Whoa. I didn't know you could do that. Learning something new every day. Sometimes you just also got to click buttons and say, what does this do? That's like I feel like a pretty big part of the project life cycle is like if you're just trying to create something, you just say, oh, what does this do? I don't know what it does, and then you just click around and find out. Script Kit on Mac OS is pretty sweet. Can write scripts to run anywhere with JavaScript, just like Obsidian. Oh, I haven't tried Script Kit. Is that where you run like Apple Script and like Automator scripts? Because I have played a little bit with Automator, and I felt like Automator was a little bit hard and convoluted. I don't know if you saw my video where I did the video editing script in JavaScript, but I have a script that allows me to use FFmpeg, and that's using, I think, Objective-C. It might be using ScriptKit, actually. I don't know. Hold on, let me see. Is this ScriptKit? Hold on, I'm gonna switch screens. Is this what you're talking about? I actually haven't seen this before. Yeah, that's it. Oh, this looks sick. Wait, yeah, no, this is fire. Okay, yeah, you can open up all the apps and file search. Oh, this is sick. Giphy. Oh, wow, that's really cool. This actually would be really helpful, I think, funnily enough, for this stream, because I find that like I have like a lot of images that I'm like saving really quickly to my clipboard, and I was like maybe thinking like, oh, I should just write like a script that allows me to like copy an image directly to clipboard and then like immediately save it into this built-on stream directory. But I could probably use like a script from ScriptKit to do that. Center app. Yeah, dude, this is awesome. Thank you for the recommendation on this. This is really cool, and it uses JavaScript, which I like. I'm a big JavaScript boy, so that you definitely keyed into my love language, which is JavaScript. So yeah, so I think that these two, this use prior work as a footstool for success, the MVP model, but then also being able to know when enough is part of the MVP model, and kind of like, let's talk maybe like prioritization and time sharing. So this last one here probably needs a little bit of elaboration because it's different than the others. But when I say project prioritization, I mean like being able to hot swap between projects and not lose where you are currently. So you want to hot swap between projects. You want to not lose where you are in a project, and you want to use what you've learned in other projects to make current one easier. And this one is the most important one coming up, is that I'm very adamant about this as an engineer, is you want to like never, and I'm going to do this in caps, never do same work twice. This is broad, obviously, because there's a lot of cases where you can't avoid doing work more than once, right? Because that's just like how, for example, eating, right? Like we all need to eat every single day. So in theory, we are never done eating, and you have to repeat the work of eating. But I find that with like a lot of content creators and coders and stuff like that, they won't take the time to abstract a little bit further above what they're doing to never have to do the same thing again. So like I have, for example, a lot of like scripts in my Alfred that allow me to save a lot of time doing things. So like I have this one, for example, that allows me to remove backgrounds from like a PNG. So I can like go in here and I can kind of like run this rem script every single time that I need to take a backgrounded image and like remove the background using machine learning. And before I would literally like run the script manually. I would like go into terminal and do this and all that. But I was like, you know what? Let me take it up a level and just like write a script that takes care of it for me. And obviously we'll talk about this with the CMS and stuff like that too later. But this is how I think that you can really limit the space of these, or limit the bottlenecks of these constraints, so that they don't become too overwhelming, and get you from having more projects from this state to this state. So basically, using prior work as a footstool for success, the MVP model, prioritization and time sharing, which was prioritization is being able to hot swap between projects and understand that certain projects are stuck in a waiting on stage because you need certain things to exist before you get there. A lot of those will be available technology or financial resources from yourself or other people for the projects that you want to complete. And I'm lagging like crazy. You want to not lose where you are in a project. This is more involved in capture, right? So the idea is that you should be actively capturing stuff that you're doing in your project work. And then you want to use what you've learned from this capture process to make your current project easier. So look at number 2. And then finally, you never want to do the same work twice. And I think that this was the most important one for finishing a lot of projects at like a high level of kind of like quote unquote, let's say like the holy grail of projects, whether you're an author or an economist or a computer scientist or you're James Cameron. you the highest level of output is being prolific, right? You've released the high quality stuff at like a quantity where people have come to expect a certain level of consistency from you, and they come back and they find your work a lot and they're very interested in what you do. And I think to be able to do that, a consistent way to be able to do that is to leverage these techniques to make it so that every new project that you take on from just a loose idea doesn't overwhelm you and explode and become finished. I think that's pretty much it. Well, actually, I did want to talk a little bit about like choosing projects, but I think basically the idea of choosing a project is that you learn when you finish more projects, which projects aren't really worth doing. So like some projects are just fun because you just want to try them out. And I think that is a expectation that you need to set going into building a project, is saying, is this going to be a project that I'm going to be sharing with other people? Is this a project that I want to have a certain financial outcome or a certain level of awards or a certain level of respect from whoever I'm looking for respect for? Or is this something for me that I just kind of want to be fun and make my life easier? So when you kind of can answer those questions, and I think most importantly, keep yourself as your first customer, it becomes really easy to decide if your project was a success or not. So thank you for listening to me talk about projects. That was good. Project Stack Overflow. And